Good morning, welcome to another edition of Motoring Northwest with me, Mark Stone, and Ken McCann. Today we're here at Brewsham Hall along with the Volvo V40 T5 all-wheel drive cross-country. With this performance hatch, if somebody was to describe, before you'd seen it, a car that's an amalgamation of angles, curves, creases, rake cutbacks, you'd probably wonder what the hell they were talking about. In many respects, none of these design cues should come together, but come together they do, and they come together well with Volvo's sporting hatch. In many respects, it's a vehicle for the family man who needs practicality, daily usability, but still wants some performance. And in the case of this particular model, that's what he gets. Customers have a choice of engine sizes, from 118 horsepower diesel to a 254 horsepower 5-cylinder petrol. Also, there's the option of two-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. Best described as all-wheel drive, though this is the cross-country model, it is still not designed to go off-road as such. The system makes it a very, very capable on-road car. The little diesels, nice and economical. The petrol under the bonnet of this, plenty of horsepower, plenty of get up and go, but you won't see particularly good economy. If you see mid-20s out of it, then you're doing extremely well. Round the back is probably the V40's most distinctive feature. The lights, the sculpted lines, the spoiler, everything else. You do get a decent sized little boot. Not the most convenient aperture, but it's there. You have a spare wheel below. Back seats drop down, the usual 70-30 split, which means it is a practical little hatchback. The one thing you have to remember about the V40 compared to its competition, certain of the other manufacturers' models will excel more at certain aspects, maybe looks, maybe comfort, maybe handling, maybe performance. Where the V40 wins is, it may not be quite as good as the competition at each of those points, but collectively it is better than its competition as an all-round vehicle. It does everything very well. It may not excel at everything, but very well to extremely well is more than sufficient for most people. It's a nice looking car, if an unusual looking car. It's distinctive, and once again it's proof positive that Volvo have now started to amalgamate the much needed style into their virtually unsurpassed record of safety. Because I'll say one thing, if you're going to have a crash in a small hatchback, this is actually the one to do it in. When you're sat in the car, when you're driving the car feels solid, it handles well, it sits there, it feels anchored down to everything. So once again, the little V40 is a car well worth serious consideration over and above its competition. after you've shoehorned yourself into the V40, low roofline means it's a bit of a clambering process to get in, and settled yourself in. Now, this seat's as low as it'll go for me, and it is still a bit too high. Observe, lack of headroom. The glass panel removes what little headroom the vehicle might actually have. Settle yourself in, fob in the pocket, not in there, it'll rattle. Centre console, it'll rattle. Foot on brake, hit the button. Right, next item that's a bit of a giveaway of its left-hand drive, and really it should be uprated to electric, is this great flange of a handbrake lever on the passenger side, which in left-hand drive form, it's the right side for the driver. Right, nice big bright dashboard, digital, ref counter around the outside. Your speed is given in big numbers in the middle, which is actually quite good, really is quite a good idea. Interestingly, the automatic gearbox, full auto, click it over to the left, you've got sport auto and you've got sequential. Surprisingly, this car does not have paddles. It would be better if it had paddle changes. You'd be able to utilise the power far more. Right, good visibility out the front, to the sides, little bit restricted to the back. The interesting thing is, with all the radar panels up here, it tells you what's in front, low speed collision avoidance, it will brake. You've got sensors to the side to tell you, especially on a motorway, if there's a car in your blind spot or else you're about to pull in too early. Relatively comfortable driving position, though for me it's rather reminiscent of driving a touring car. Back low, steering wheel nice and close. It is relatively comfortable, but you've still got to, it's still a struggle to actually get there. So what's driving the car like? Well, with 254 brake horsepower on tap, it's no slouch. Also, big discs all round, it pulls up and stops well. The interesting thing, the suspension is something of a compromise. It is performance car suspension, however, on anything other than a flat, smooth surface, it does tend to crash quite a lot. Cornering wise, very, very flat, reasonably neutral until you start pushing it hard. With an all-wheel drive system there to keep you firmly anchored to the ground, the car just goes round corners. But what you have to bear in mind is 5-cylinder lump up front, transverse mounted, start to push around the corner and the sheer weight of the engine will start to pull you wide. The car doesn't understeer as such, it just starts to pull wide when you start pushing it round corners. That said, turn it in early and the car will perform quite well for you. As I said, compared to its competition that do certain things very well, the Volvo does most things acceptably well. But once again, plenty of performance. Drop it into sequential, put your foot down, you will happily be able to use all the power. As I said, it can be a slightly bouncy ride. Equally, the centre console, all the buttons. Equate yourself with what they do and what they are, because even then you will still have to look down to work out what they all do, which is the one you want. It does all the media, the telephone, to a degree there's an old-fashioned telephone keypad in the middle. You've got the heated windows fore and aft, you've got the self-parking system, which it will scan to find out if there is a space wide enough, then it will park itself. Some people enjoy using it, I'm still relatively distrustful of it. Equally, the reversing cameras. You've got two reversing cameras. You've got one that looks away to find out what there is, and you've got one that looks down to see what is immediately behind the car. As I said, nice big readout, you can tell exactly what speed you're doing, big and bold. Also, on the right of the dashboard, if you're using sequential, it will tell you what gear you are in. It's one of those cars like any vehicle. Once you start pushing it, start to push it gently for you to be able to find out what it can do, when it can do it, how it will do it. But as regards an off-road vehicle, I wouldn't like to go off-roading it. Though it has a slightly increased ride height in comparison to the normal V40s, it isn't a high ride height like the SC60 or the XC90. As you probably heard there, the big bank of red lights came on telling me that there was a vehicle approaching. If you're not careful, until you're used to them, the sensors either side, the big orange lights will come on. At first it is a little bit, it's not so much worrying, but all of a sudden it does something, or it starts to try and tell you something you are not expecting. All in all though, it's not a bad vehicle to drive. It's lively, it's very, very responsive for what is actually quite a big car. It just drives all right. Anybody looking for this type of motor will be very pleased with it. As I said, the only downside to it is, in comparison to its two-wheel drive and diesel brethren, this, over a space of 125 miles, has returned 21.6 to the gallon, which by today's standards, especially with the price of petrol being what it is, isn't marvellous. Which is, you can understand why a lot of these vehicles are company cars. The guy behind the wheel is not paying the bill. My advice is, try one. Initially, see if you can actually get in one. If you can, and you can get comfortable, then no problem. It's a car that you will probably enjoy driving, and enjoy driving quite a long distance. But the other thing, there are other vehicles out there that may not be as accomplished as an all-round motor, but offer greater degrees of comfort, various price levels, and it's one of those things. Try it for yourself. For me, the V40 T5 is alright. Its plus side is the performance and the handling. The downside is, even after a week driving the car, I am truly not fully comfortable behind the wheel. So that's it from another edition of Motoring Northwest here at Brewsham Hall. So till next time, safe driving.